Hey guys, what's back to the video? In this video, I'm going to be ranking every single Star Wars project. So if you guys didn't know, I actually just got into Star Wars earlier this year. In March, I started watching all of the movies for the first time. I'd seen 2 of the sequels in theaters, but other than that, I watched all of the Star Wars movies for the first time, and I have a lot of thoughts on them. And I was waiting until Andor Season 1 was over so that I could tier list every single Star Wars project that I've seen. Now, there are 3 projects that I haven't seen, and that includes Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and Star Wars Resistance. And before we get into it, let me know your ranking for all of the Star Wars movies and TV shows in the comments down below. But without wasting more time, let's get into it. So the tier list is on screen now. So these are all the projects that I'm ranking again. I mentioned the ones I have not watched yet, and I plan to get to those sometime soon, but I did watch all the movies for the first time. So this obviously includes most of those. But starting it off with Attack of the Clones, I'm going to put this at meh. I'm not the biggest fan of the prequel trilogy, and I'll give more of my thoughts as we go on through the tier list, but I think Attack of the Clones is a meh movie. It's not that fun. I mean, I think the final act of all the prequels are really great, but the rest of the movies are just very boring to me. Even Revenge of the Sith, which I'll talk about just in a bit, I definitely think that the final 2 acts of the movie are amazing, but the first act is just god-awful boring. Moving on to one of the newer Disney Plus TV shows, Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm also going to put this one at meh. If you guys didn't know, I like to put them in order within the tier list so you guys can actually see the ranking within the tier list. So yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi above Attack of the Clones. My biggest thing with Obi-Wan Kenobi is that, yeah, it's a good show, but I just think that there was so much more potential. There was so much more story you could tell. And the final 2 episodes really lean into that. But other than that, it really didn't do much for me. And again, I feel like they could have done so much more. And then the show that came out right before it, The Book of Boba Fett, I'm going to put this at meh as well. And I'm going to put it, I would say right below Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know. Again, this show is just unneeded in my opinion. Like, there was no point for us to have the show. It felt like a Mando season 2.5 towards the end. You had one episode that was the only Mando episode, and that was the best episode of the entire show. And then the final episode, the finale, just became a cameo fest. Like, this show really didn't do anything spectacular. I was really vibing with Boba's origin story and stuff like that. And I found all that semi-interesting. But then you kind of get to the end of the show and you kind of stray away from that completely. And even the Boba's origin part, it's not even that interesting. It was just interesting enough that I was like, okay, I'll keep watching it. And then you just take the show completely away and you make it even better with characters that aren't even in the lead. So it's just frustrating overall, in my opinion. All right, so next up is the first one of the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens. And I think I have the biggest hot take on this movie. I'm going best of the best. I genuinely think this movie is amazing. Aside from it even being in the Star Wars universe, I think this movie does such great stuff with its storytelling, the visuals. Even though I think The Last Skywalker, or Rise of Skywalker, it is a really good visually looking movie. Even The Last Jedi is a visually looking movie. That's phenomenal, right? But this movie, I think what it does so special is that it introduces us to Rey, but it also introduces us to Kylo. It also introduces the battle between the dark side. It has those phenomenal moments with Han Solo and Kylo. Like, there are so many moments in this movie that are just ingrained in my mind. This is also my first Star Wars movie in theaters. You might be asking, Arian, why did you watch this without watching any other previous movies and The Last Jedi in theaters? I honestly don't know. I saw it was playing and I watched it and I really liked it and I had no idea what the previous story was. And I will say this also. I felt so emotionally heartbroken when Han Solo died, and I didn't even see him in any other movies. All I knew is that he was a character that existed, right? And so the fact that it made me care so deeply for this character just shows how much and how deep his story is in this movie alone, let alone the original trilogy. I just think that this movie does so much stuff well, and at the end of the day, it's one of the best looking Star Wars movies. It has one of the more unique stories in terms of the way that they build up these characters. And I think it's different. Like, it has a different idea than the prequels and the original trilogy just because there's no really basis to go off of. And this one is, you have a general basis, but you can really do anything you want with these newer characters. And so I was very excited to just keep rewatching this movie during my watch through the entire franchise. I was so excited to get back to this movie because I was worried that it wouldn't live up to what I used to think of it, but it honestly exceeded it. Again, I absolutely love this movie. I think storytelling visually is just amazing. And then next up, we have Solo. Now, I don't want to hate on this movie because I still think it's a good movie, but I will also say this was probably the hardest one to get through on my entire watch of the franchise, other than the Rise of the Skywalker, which I'll talk about why later in this video when I get to it. But Solo, I'm gonna go good. I think it's a good movie. It's a solid movie. It's a prequel movie. I think it's all right. You know, it's not bad, but it's just good. You know, it's there. You turn it on. I don't think anyone will be mad, but they'll be like, let's put on a different Star Wars movie. But I think it's good. You know, there's good performances. There's great visuals. I think it meshes together the story that we love of Han Solo with these modern day Disney visuals. And I think it does all of it very well. Moving on to The Mandalorian, I would put this one right below The Force Awakens. I think it's a very, very, very great show. One of my favorite shows of all time. I think there's a few episodes here and there that aren't like peak television, which might make me bump it a little bit down to great as we move forward in this. But I don't know. Again, I can move this stuff around as we go. And again, stick to the end of this video so you can see my final tier list. But I think The Mandalorian's really phenomenal. Like, I think the biggest pro of this show is the fact that it can have filler episodes without feeling filler episodes because it's still integral to our relationship between Grogu and Mando. Like, there's these small moments within the show that are even in like episodes that you're like, oh, it's not important, but it's still important to this character study that we have on Mando. And so I really like that. I'm also very excited for season 3, The War of Mandalore. I think that's what it's called. We're going to be seeing that kind of stuff, which is always exciting. And I think the finale of Mando season 2 is very interesting. I know a lot of people that love it because of the fan service. I know a lot of people that hate it because of the fan service that actually love the show as a whole. But I don't really have an opinion on the finale, really, because when I was watching the finale, I hadn't yet seen all of the other Star Wars movies. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, he's back, he's de-aged, that's all great. But it didn't really strike an emotional chord with me like it did for other people. And so I wasn't really like biased in one way or another because of that. I will also say the visuals, the writing, everything on a technical aspect and a storytelling aspect, this show is pretty much perfect in my opinion. And yeah, that's pretty much all of my thoughts on Mando. I absolutely love the show. And then we have Star Wars A New Hope, the first one that started it all. And I think I have a hot take on this one. I think it's a great movie. I don't think it's best of the best, though. I know a lot of people, whether it's nostalgia or they genuinely believe it's the best of the best. I just think it's a great movie at the end of the day. It's not just plain good, because even good is like, you know, it's just a good movie. Like, it's above average. It's a good flick, but it is great. I mean, the storytelling, it's very basic, and that's my problem with a lot of the original trilogy. But then you kind of find out that, okay, this is more of like you're setting the basis for the world, and you still have these super interesting and compelling characters. I really like the direction they went in with this first movie and the way that they just set the basis for everything. All right, next up is the first movie in the prequels, The Phantom Menace. I'm gonna have to put this one at bad, and I'm also moving Attack of the Clones down to bad as well, just above The Phantom Menace, but still. I think these two movies are absolutely horrendous. The more I think about it, actually, like, the only redeeming factor of The Phantom Menace is Darth Maul, and I think he's a very cool character. His, like, lightsabers are really cool. All of these aspects of him are cool. But as a whole, these movies are just not good at all. You cannot, with a straight face, tell me that these movies are actually good movies. And it's not even the CGI. I don't care about the CGI. It's just that this is all very uninteresting to me, and maybe it's because I'm watching it so much later and I've already seen these better Star Wars stories, but I just don't really see the appeal to the first two prequel movies. From the people I've talked to about it, it seems like it's like 99% nostalgia, and so I don't really have much else to say. I don't want to be a hater, so I'm just going to move on. So next up is Andor, the newest Star Wars project, and as of right now, I'm gonna go best of the best at the very, very top. There is one movie that I think is better than Andor, and you guys will see that in just a second here, but I think Andor is one of the peak Star Wars projects. It's the second best Star Wars project in my opinion. This show is phenomenal, from its writing to its ability to balance sci-fi yet emotional moments. I made a full spoiler review on all of Andor season 1 if you guys want to check it out, but there will be no spoilers here. I just think that the way that they play out the events in this show, and the fact that it was supposed to be 5 seasons long and they condensed it down to 2 seasons, 12 episodes in each season, the way that they tell these arcs, it's 3 episode arcs and then one finale to bring it all together. The way that this story is just told to the audience is the best Star Wars storytelling ever, in my opinion. And honestly, Andor is the best Star Wars project, in my opinion, because it's easily the best made. Even though it has no fan service at all, it's not connected to pretty much anything else other than a few character mentions in the Star Wars universe, it's still the best project to come out of the Star Wars world, in my opinion. And then next up, we have Revenge of the Sith. And as you guys can see, I have my little poster up there for Revenge of the Sith. I am very mixed on this movie, because the thing is, I love the final act. The final act may just be one of the best pieces of Star Wars content ever. But the first act of this movie is slow as hell. The second act does a really great job of building up characters to the final act. But then you kind of look back at the movie and you're watching and you're like, okay, the first half of this movie is kind of like, I'm just gonna go on my phone during the first half of this movie, and then when we get to the second half and stuff starts to get interesting, then I'll tap back in, right? And so for that, I don't know if I can put it at best of the best. That's the problem. Is like, I think parts of this movie are phenomenal, but the other parts are just like, let me go on my phone and forget this part of the movie even exists. And even the final duel is like, the final duel is phenomenal, but the rest of the movie is just, I'm gonna put it at top of the grade. Because I have one more movie, two more movie. I'll put one more movie in best of the best. From what we have left, and that kind of gives a little bit of a spoiler away. But next up, we have The Rise of the Skywalker. This one also goes in bad, but I do put it at the top of the bad. Now, I know a lot of people are gonna be like, you're just a prequels hater then, and thing is, I don't think the prequels are just that good in terms of like the storytelling. It's not even like at the time, and I think the character work is great in the prequels. But at the end of the day, it doesn't do much else visually, storytelling wise. And even though The Rise of the Skywalker, it doesn't do much for us storytelling wise, but at least there's some interesting type of story going on. Even though
somehow Palpatine returned.
Even though that's the stupidest part of the movie, or honestly stupidest line of anything in the Star Wars franchise, I still think the visuals are enough to actually have us entertained for the runtime of this movie. And so, I mean, I think everything in the bad category kind of goes hand in hand with one another. None of these are good movies, and I probably would not rewatch them. Actually, you know, I might rewatch Attack of the Clones. So I would put Attack of the Clones above it, because I think I would, if I was to pick any of these bad movies to rewatch, I would pick Attack of the Clones, not Rise of Skywalker. And I also said earlier, I have something to say about Rise of Skywalker. Now, the reason this took me so long to watch is because, first of all, I didn't want to get started on the prequels. That took me the longest time to do. But also, I finished my entire rewatch until Rise of the Skywalker. And as you guys know, I was a huge fan of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi before I watched Rise of Skywalker. And I still am a huge fan of those movies. But I didn't want my vision on the sequels to be tainted, because I believe that they were absolutely amazing movies, and I knew that the one thing this movie does is absolutely ruin every story that's been told up to this point in the sequels. And so I was just very much not wanting to watch it. But yeah, it kind of sucks that they absolutely just ruined great stories, in my opinion, through this one last movie. So I don't know what else to say about it. It's a very frustrating movie. But next up, we have The Empire Strikes Back, and this was the movie that is my number one, my favorite Star Wars movie. It's the best of the best, in my opinion. If you guys didn't know, I have a Empire Strikes Back poster right up there. I ordered that literally like minutes after finishing the movie for the first time. I've seen that movie 4 times now. It's my most rewatched Star Wars movie. I'm telling you guys, I'm absolutely in love with the movie. I think it's just phenomenal on a filmmaking level. On a story level, it is a little bit basic, but it's less basic than all of the other Star Wars movies. And I think the characters are just the most compelling. There's more compelling character story arcs. It's also the most emotional out of the bunch, in my opinion. I just think overall, it's just a very successful Star Wars movie in terms of, yes, laying ground, but also being just an emotional movie with a great story overall, something that's very engaging. And I think behind that final duel in the prequels, I would say that the fights in this movie are top tier Star Wars. And I don't know, I just think everything in this movie is very well crafted. It does a great job of taking what we got from the first movie and moving it on, and moving the characters on in emotional ways, but also funny ways. This movie is comedic in itself, and I just think as a whole, it's a very well crafted Star Wars project. Next up is Return of the Jedi, and I do think this one goes in best of the best. I actually don't know the general consensus about this movie even, but I really do like the movie. I think it's such a compelling story about Luke's battle between the dark and the light side, and overall, it's just a very, very fun movie as well. It's probably the more serious movie out of the bunch of Star Wars movies, but I don't know. I very much like this movie. I've only seen it one time though, so I don't know if it'll stay in best of the best over time, but as a whole, I do think the top tier are best of the best Star Wars movies. I think they're phenomenal movies, but even the best of the best doesn't really compare to the rest of the franchise, other franchises, in my opinion. I'm gonna quickly compare Star Wars to other franchises after I'm done with this tier list. So we only have 2 movies left. So let's finish it off with The Last Jedi. I also think I have a hot take for this one, and I'm gonna go the top of great. I do think this is better than Revenge of the Sith. I do think it's best of the best, to be honest, but I forgot that the shows also add in a few more in the best of the best. So I don't want to put too much in the best of the best because it's not the best of the best if it's like the 6th one. And so I am going to put it at the top of great. I think this is a great project overall. And I do think it's the best looking Star Wars movie. The final battle is one of the best Star Wars final battles. I think it's just so smart in the way that it uses storytelling to get the message across of this fight within yourself. And I also love the use of Luke Skywalker in this movie. It's probably the best use of him since the original movies, in my opinion. And at the end of the day, I just think this movie is a testament to all of Star Wars because, yeah, it is part of the sequels. Yeah, it's a Disney Star Wars movie. And yeah, I did put The Force Awakens above it. But as an emotional story, I think this is probably the best Star Wars movie.
5 minutes later.
God, the more I think about it, I just want to move it up. I really do. I want to move it above Return of the Jedi. But that's not what it's on my official ranking. But I might have to switch to my official ranking right about now. I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to put it up here. And honestly, I think I'm going to move Return of the Jedi to great. I think I'm going to put it above Revenge of the Sith. I think that's what I have to do here. But yeah, I think this is the ranking I'm going to stick with for the best of the best to great. But the final project here is Star Wars Visions, and I am going to put it in good. I'll put it right above Solo. I think this is a great project, and I'm super excited for season 2 because Star Wars Visions is this super cool thing. It's you can have these elements of the rest of the Star Wars universe, but tell them in super contained stories that all feel very, very different. The first episode of Star Wars Visions is one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars content ever. It is amazing. The fight choreography is absolutely insane. Very minimal, like, exploration of the world that you're in, but you just dive right in. It's a samurai-esque story, and I love the way that they craft these stories. And I think there are a few misses here. There are a few of them that are just a little bit too childish for me. But you're telling an array of stories, and so that array isn't all meant for me. That array might actually include a little kid that wants to watch this show. And so it's different projects for different people. And I think for what this show is, it's really, really great. And I'm super excited to see season 2 and what they do with the different art styles and if they continue any of the stories that were really interesting from season 1. So yeah, guys, that's my official tier list / ranking of all of the Star Wars projects that I've seen. Again, I haven't seen 3 of them, and I know Attack of the Clones is very important to Star Wars lore, so I want to get to that one eventually. But at the end of the day, I think Star Wars is a great franchise, but I feel like there's just too many misses with too much missed potential in this entire franchise with the amount of projects that they have. And so at the end of the day, I do prefer the MCU and the Wizarding World of Harry Potter over Star Wars, but that's not to say that Star Wars is bad. I'm actually doing a rewatch of all of the Harry Potter movies right now, so expect a video on that very, very soon because I'm so excited to finish those up because I absolutely love those movies as well. But yeah, I'm super happy I finally tapped into all of Star Wars because some of these movies are absolutely amazing. Again, let me know your ranking for all of the Star Wars projects that you've seen in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.